What's up, friends? Welcome back into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Pretty straightforward episode today, going over Brian Gutekunst's press conference. Before we get there, just one piece of news. We had first team and second team All-Pros announced by the Associated Press. We had two Packers that made one on each list, I guess. One first team All-Pro, one second team All-Pro. The first team All-Pro, imagine me telling you this at the beginning of the season. Not Aaron Rodgers, not Aaron Jones, not Jair Alexander, not Rashawn Gary, not Kenny Clark, not go on and on, right? Your first team All-Pro Green Bay Packer is Keisean Nixon. I don't know anyone that could have possibly predicted that in any way, shape, or form. And of course, he makes it as a returner. So first team All-Pro returner for Keisean Nixon, completely 100% deserved. He was phenomenal. He completely changed the way the Packers were playing football. He gave them a massive spark. And like I said, you'd be hard pressed to find a player who sort of just kind of changed the way Green Bay played and just really gave them that boost of energy that they needed. Outside of really the two Packers, Christian Watson and Keisean Nixon, the way that those two did when they sort of really came on mid-season. So completely deserved for Keisean Nixon. And then Jair Alexander was the second team All-Pro. Really interesting season for Jair. You look at the start of the season, don't think he was anywhere near the player that he was, really a couple of years prior. Remember, he was injured so much in 2021. Didn't really play with a level of physicality. Didn't seem to really want to get, his hands dirty too often. I didn't think he covered quite as well. I think a lot of that was due to him being asked to play a brand of coverage that wasn't his brand of football. I don't think he was put in the best position to succeed. Then you get to the second half of the season and he starts piling up interceptions. He had the phenomenal game against Justin Jefferson, shutting him down. And I just thought that if you look at his more recent body of work, the last, 5-6 weeks, he looked like a first team All-Pro. So it's just, you kind of have to balance out. It's like, didn't play great at the beginning of the season. Wasn't all his fault. Part of it was circumstances that he didn't have under his control. Then you had kind of like an okay period. And then you had like a last, like I said, 6 weeks-ish where he looked like a legitimate first team All-Pro during that time. So no issues with him being voted second team All-Pro. And certainly Jair is an incredibly deserving player overall, phenomenal corner. And just nice to see two Packers on the list in Keisean Nixon and Jair Alexander. All right, that brings us to Brian Gutekunst's press conference, which was mostly much ado about nothing. There's no, you're not going to find a soundbite that's like, oh, did you hear Brian Gutekunst say this, right? You have to remember, really good general managers are specifically vague and veiled in how they perform these press conferences, right? You don't want to give away too much. You don't want to not give away anything. So you have to sort of play this little tap dance of, I'm going to say some things, but I'm not going to say a ton. And then it's really up to everyone sometimes to sort of read between the lines. And I did think there were a couple things that you could sort of read between the lines. I thought there were a couple things that were noteworthy. So we'll go over all of that. And it was clear going in, before the press conference even started, you knew what the line of questioning was going to be. Brian Gutekunst knew what the line of questioning was going to be. It was going to start out about Aaron Rodgers. Will he be back? Did they want him back? And those sort of things. And here were some of the responses from Brian Gutekunst in regards to Aaron Rodgers and if he'll be part of the team and if he'll be back next season. He said, quote, "I want all our guys back. He's going to take his time. And, he said, as we work through this, which I'll get more to in just a moment, we'll get together and move forward that way." So those were just a couple of the quotes. Basically, if you're reading between the lines, he's basically saying we want all of our guys back. Rodgers is going to make his decision. We're going to give him his time. Then at that point, we'll work through it and we'll work together and move forward that way. That was sort of the gist of his initial response. Then he was asked, quote, "To clarify, you think it is his decision in regards to coming back if he wants to be back?" And then Brian Gutekunst followed up and said, quote, "We made a really big commitment to him last offseason. As we did that, it certainly wasn't just for 1 year, just for this year, excuse me. He's going to have to take his time and the communication will be pretty constant as we move forward." Now, I'm going to come back to all of this in just a moment because I think there's an important difference here as we start going through the four players that he was asked about in his press conference. He was asked about Aaron Rodgers. He was asked about David Bakhtiari. He was asked about Mason Crosby, and he was asked about Aaron Jones in that order. So we just went over his response on a couple different occasions to Aaron Rodgers. When he was asked about David Bakhtiari, and whether he would be back, he said, quote, "I would hope so," and then went on to compliment David Bakhtiari after that. But the quote there was, "I would hope so." Mason Crosby, his quote was, "These are all decisions that we'll go through." And then he went on to praise Mason Crosby. And then with Aaron Jones, his quote on Aaron Jones was, "Certainly we expect to have him back." So 4 different players, 4 very different answers. Rodgers was a little bit more veiled. David Bakhtiari, I would hope to have him back. Mason Crosby, all decisions that we'll go through. Aaron Jones, certainly we expect to have him back. So if you're sort of power ranking those, right? Aaron Jones, certainly back. David Bakhtiari, we hope is back, basically. Then Mason Crosby, really a no comment. And then Aaron Rodgers, we want all our players back. So you're probably going Jones, you feel the most confident about, then Bakhtiari, then Rodgers, then Crosby, just based off of his responses, right? Now, I want to be clear here. There is nothing that you can glean in any significant way towards any of these players. I think the most that you can glean is from Aaron Jones' comment, right? Like, certainly we expect him back. It's tough to go in an opposite direction after saying that, but you never quite know. And the reason that is, and we'll get more on this in Jordan Love in just a moment, is maybe they hope to trade Aaron Jones. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that he's going to go anywhere. I legitimately do, but just let's role play that scenario out for a moment, right? If he goes into this press conference thinking like, we really want to drum up some interest for Aaron Jones. We don't think we're going to be able to pay him that contract, but we certainly just don't want to release him. So we've got to make other teams think that he's going to be back and a huge part of our team, so that if some team comes calling, they don't just think we're going to release him and maybe we can get some draft capital out of it, right? Don't think that's the case. To be clear, I think Aaron Jones is going to be back. I think that was evident in his response. But here's the bigger point. GMs lie, and they have to say specific things in specific scenarios so that they're not giving away their intentions to other teams, which can then maybe undercut value for a player in a trade, or basically tell other teams what you're thinking about your own players or what positions you might need in the offseason, all of those sort of things. So there is a purpose to how Brian Gutekunst is going to answer certain questions, not just from a media standpoint, not just for what his players are going to hear, but for what other GMs and teams are potentially going to hear and agents are going to hear as well. So it's all very important to know that this is all a little bit of a song and dance and a game from Brian Gutekunst and how he answers some of these questions. But it was noteworthy that there were 4 very different answers, and with Jones being the clearest. And I want to then go back to Aaron Rodgers, because he had the opportunity to answer about Aaron initially. And the response immediately was, "I want all our guys back." And remember, Brian knew this line of questioning was coming, right? It's not like he got to the podium and is like, "All right, we're going to, probably talk about, special teams today," or something. It's like he knew the very first question was going to be about Aaron Rodgers, and the initial response is, "I want all of our guys back. He's going to take his time. We'll work through this, and then we'll get together and move forward that way." That was his initial response. And then when he's asked to clarify, you think it's his decision in regards to coming back if he wants to come back, his response is, "We made a really big commitment to him last offseason. As we did that, certainly it wasn't just for this year. He's going to take his time, and the communication will be pretty constant moving forward." He had 2 opportunities to just basically say, especially on that second one, to just say, "Yeah, if Aaron wants to come back, we welcome him back. He's going to be our quarterback." He could have said the exact same statement that he said about Aaron Jones, about Aaron Rodgers. When he was asked again to clarify, you think it's his decision in regards to coming back, he said, "Certainly yes." He could have said, "Certainly yes. We expect Aaron Rodgers to be a Green Bay Packer this year if he wants to come back and play." He could have said that. He did not. And here was sort of the big tell to me in this situation. Reminder that Brian Gutekunst was asked about this when he did his press conference around the bye week, just about a couple months ago, not even. So he was asked about this. 2 of these things were talking points at this point, because he used the exact same phrases. The first one, "We want all our guys back," or "I want all our guys back," is a talking point that he has used specifically before. And the other one, "We made a really big commitment to him last offseason. As we did that, it certainly wasn't just for this year." That is the second talking point that he has also given previously at the bye week. So this is no longer him just basically answering free form. This is not him answering to give away anything. This is him giving out a talking point like a politician would in a debate almost. It's almost like he's very specifically not giving a definitive answer. And that's how I read this very, very, very clearly to me. As I listened to it like live, I'm like, oh, he's specifically sort of avoiding the question. He's giving an answer, but he's avoiding it. He doesn't want to answer it categorically. Now, I think a huge part of that is that it's because it's in Aaron's court right now, that it's Aaron's decision right now. And I think to some extent, not to some extent, 1,000,000% extent, if you're the Green Bay Packers, you don't want to make anything leading in this scenario until you find out what Aaron's decision is first. And the reason that I say that is because if Green Bay, not that Brian Gutekunst would have come out and said this anyway, but if Brian Gutekunst maybe waffled back and forth of like, maybe we want him back, we'll see, we're not sure yet. Or if he just would have said, I think we want to go in a different direction, it's time to see Jordan Love. Like if he would have come out and said that, to a lot of people, both in the media and fans, etc., who's the bad guy in that scenario? The Packers, Brian Gutekunst. They're the bad guys. They kicked out the 4-time MVP, the Hall of Famer. It's Brett Favre all over again. It's not about the people. And like if Aaron Rodgers can't retire as a Packer, that's on Brian Gutekunst. There would have been, not by everyone, but there would have been people extremely upset with the Green Bay Packers if that's the decision that they wanted to go in. Now, if all of a sudden Aaron comes out and says, I want to retire, even if Green Bay even if that's what they want, and I'm very clear here that I'm not saying that's what they want, but if Green Bay would be thinking, we hope he retires or we hope he demands a trade, like we want to move to Jordan Love. If Aaron comes out and says, I want to retire, they can just go, okay, Aaron's retiring. We don't have to be the bad guys. And if he says, I want to go, I want to compete. I still think I can compete at a high level, but I think it's time to go in another direction for both sides. I think Green Bay's better off without me. I think I have a better opportunity to go win a Super Bowl somewhere else. If he comes out and says something like that he just wants a fresh start somewhere, Green Bay once again can exhale and say, okay, we're not the bad guys. We didn't force a trade. It's Aaron is the one that's asking for or demanding a trade, and we'll go along with it if we have to. I'm hypothesizing or role playing here of like if Green Bay wanted to trade him or wanted him to move on or wanted him to retire or whatever, they're going to let him do that first before they say anything definitive. So I think the big key here, the big takeaway for me is that they want Aaron to make the decision first. And then as you kind of heard him say, then they'll have the conversations and they'll talk to Aaron and they'll work together as a team to figure out what's best to do. But it was also obvious to me that they didn't just come out and say, if Aaron wants to be back, he will be back. He will be the quarterback of the Packers. And I know you can point to the comment of we made a really big commitment to him this last offseason. As we did that, it certainly wasn't just for this year. I think that is something that you can point to. But the fact that he's used that exact same line now twice, and it was almost, again, it was used as a talking point rather than just like he could have just answered the question. Again, if he's asked to clarify, you think it's his decision in regards to coming back if he wants to be back, he could have just said, yes, I think it's Aaron's decision. But that's not what he said. And I think by just not answering that clearly and not just saying unequivocally, if Aaron wants to be back, he's back, I think to me that opens up the window for them to say, hey, maybe it's time to go in another direction. And so the big thing here is I don't think this is open and shut. I don't think this is like case closed. If Aaron wants to be back, he's a Packer. I still believe as of right now, at this very moment, and it could change 5 seconds from now from some new report or anything else that could potentially come out, I still think the easiest solution is the most likely. And the easiest solution being that Aaron doesn't want to walk away from a ton of money and the opportunity to compete again next season and play football again. He says he wants to come back to Green Bay, which is the easiest thing for him to do. And Green Bay says instead of causing a bunch of chaos and trading him away and all of that, just the entire media firestorm that comes with that, I think they just say, okay, we'll do that. We'll see what we can do moving forward. We'll see if we can keep Jordan Love and keep him happy. But we'll just kind of go along with that. If I were a betting man still today, I would say most likely if Aaron wants to come back, he'll be a Packer. But this, to me, the way that Brian answered those questions and left it specifically vague and didn't answer them directly, leads me to believe that there is still some hesitation, or at least they want to leave a slight crack in the window open to be able to make a decision and see what they want to do as a franchise once Aaron says whatever decision he makes, right? So that's what I took away from this. And it was especially telling, again, in these, because they're so veiled, because they're so vague, you have to read between the lines. And if you read between the lines of how he answered about Aaron Jones and the difference between Aaron Rodgers, they were two totally different statements. So at the end of the day, your guess is as good as mine. And it's tough to glean from a GM who, A, could be lying, B, at best is trying to be very veiled and very vague about things, specifically to a point of being skilled in doing that. And, I'm sure as a GM, if you're having that press conference, you always want to leave all options on the table. I talk about in games all the time about leaving yourself outs and giving you options to win games at the end. This is like a GM giving himself outs. This is by saying when we talked back, at the end of the season, I gave my press conference then, what I basically said at that time is that we were going to let Aaron make his decision, and then we would come together as a team and with Aaron and make a decision all together at that point. I never said, he was ultimately going to be back with the team. He's left himself an out. And rightfully so, respectfully so. I think he handled this entire press conference very well when it came to Aaron Rodgers and how he answered the questions. I don't think Aaron can look at it and be like, man, they disrespected me. Like, they clearly don't want me back. I don't think it was anything like that. And I don't think we can look back and be like, man, I can't believe that they said they wanted him back and then went out and traded him or something like that. I don't think it was that either. I think it was a very well done press conference by a GM that's not trying to get talking pointed to death and, up on ESPN and Fox Sports and everywhere else where his quotes are regurgitated over and over and disseminated basically like I'm doing right now. So apologies, Brian Gutekunst. But for the most part, I think you did a phenomenal job in handling your questions and gave yourself out. So kudos to you for that. A couple other things that I wanted to discuss. The next one, the next kind of big takeaway was with Jordan Love. And once again, it's worth noting here that it could be lying, and he could be trying to drum up interest for Jordan Love in a trade if Aaron is back. Maybe they realize that if Aaron's back, trying to keep Jordan is a fool's errand because Jordan and his agent are going to want to go somewhere else to compete for a starting job, and they know they can't pick up his fifth-year option because of the salary situation with Aaron then next year. So maybe they're like, man, if all of a sudden Aaron is back, we've got to make sure that there's interest out there for Jordan Love. So he said the next step in Jordan's development is that he needs to play. We really like where Jordan's at. I definitely think he's ready to play. So those were some of the quotes that he gave, and it's in him and LaFleur and other players have made comments that Jordan's ready to play. They think he can be a starting quarterback in this league. So we'll see if he gets that opportunity, but it was another round of, comments, positive comments about Jordan Love. But like I said, you have to take it with a grain of salt because he could just be trying to drum up trade interest. And you're certainly not going to be like, nah, I don't think he's ready yet. Like he just hasn't looked good in training camp. Like we don't think he can be the guy. You're not going to say that. So again, you have to sort of take this with a grain of salt. The one thing that I did think was interesting when talking about Jordan Love, he was asked specifically if it was a given that they would pick up his fifth-year option. And he said it's not a given that they will pick up his fifth-year option, and they're working through what's best right now. So that was honestly like one of the most honest takeaways from the entire thing is that they're not certain yet that they'll pick up his fifth-year option. He didn't say yes or no, but that they're legitimately having to go through that. And it all ties to Aaron, what happens with Aaron, how his agent and Love feel about if Aaron's back. Like that stuff's all tied together. So they're going to have to come to a conclusion on what's best, but he flat out said it's not a given that they're going to pick up that fifth-year option. So that was a little bit telling as well. One of the more not interesting aspects, but it was just nice to hear it. Like it was a given anyway, but it's nice to hear it. Like he was asked if they were going to have to redo, basically some deals and do some restructures to clear salary cap space, which As mentioned, it had to be done. It didn't really need to be asked because they don't have any other options. They're going to have to do that. But he just came out and said they're going to have to redo deals no matter what. And then when they asked if they were going to have to like restructure Aaron Jones and things like that, he's like, based on how things are going, we're probably going to have to restructure everybody to keep making some room. And he said it with a smile. So he knows the salary cap situation that they're in, and they're going to have to continue to open up space and restructure contracts. This is not something that is ending anytime soon. So this is going to be another offseason of a lot of restructures and opening salary cap space for this team in one capacity or the other, regardless of who is quarterback, so that they can, keep some of their key guys and, put a team on the field that can be semi-functional. And then last but not least, I think the other final takeaway here is a very similar, kind of theme that we got from Matt LaFleur and Matt LaFleur's final press conference. Matt LaFleur, when asked, basically said he believes in his team and he believes in his coaching staff, that he doesn't foresee any changes on his coaching staff, and that he wants to continue this moving forward. And there was no sign of change, right? From LaFleur. With Brian Gutekunst, he said, quote, "I believe in the people in this building." And overall, the overarching theme, again, in my opinion, was there was no sign of a rebuild. There was no sign of a ripping of the Band-Aid. There was no sign of a whole-scale change. He did say there's going to be changes on the roster, which there's going to be every year. There's going to be a turnover of at least 20 players on just about every single roster this year. So that's certainly nothing new. But the theme that I've gotten from LaFleur and from Gutekunst is more, not status quo, because that sounds terrible because they're coming off an 8-9 season, but more that they believe in the people, the coaches, the process, and the players in the building. Now, right, wrong, indifferent, you can sound off in the comments below. Anytime you're coming off an 8-9 season, I know everyone in Packers sphere is like, change, fire, terminate, whatever, hire somebody new. Like, all those are the comments, right? Go to a new quarterback. And I understand some of it. Certainly, I think when you have a disappointing season, especially with the amount of resources that they put into this last year, just coming back and saying, especially after Matt LaFleur right after the game says, we're going to go through everything with a fine tooth comb and figure out exactly what's wrong. And then 12 hours later is like, well, we're going to keep everything the same on the staff. That's not the problem. Okay, well, I don't think that comb was that fine tooth if that's your immediate decision 12 hours later. But either way, it does seem like the theme from both Brian and Matt is that they have the people within the organization to make this team work. And now they're going to have to go out and do it, because if that is the decision for Matt and Brian, that, they're going to bring this back, they're going to redo it, or like not just redo it, but like they're obviously going to bring a core group of the guys back that they did last year with a few tweaks here and there, and they're going to bring back the same coaching staff and everything like that. The pressure then moves very, very much so to Brian and Matt, right? Now the heat is on them. If this team doesn't go out and compete next year after bringing a lot of the same players back and not making any changes, it goes from, well, maybe it's Joe Barry or maybe it's Aaron Rodgers to, no, you saw what Aaron was in 2022. You saw what Joe Barry did in 2021 and 2022. It was your decision to keep those players. And now if things go poorly next year, that is on your hands, both Brian and Matt. So if they do keep things the same, the heat certainly picks up on them quite a bit. But that seems to be the messaging so far, is that the people in the building, players, coaches, staff, etc., are the group that they think that can get this turned around and be more successful next year. Whether they can or not will remain to be seen. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. Always appreciate you. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. So until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.